I mean, agility is not a luxury, it's a necessity, right? Like almost nothing is going to go the way that you think it's going to go in the time frame that you think it's going to go there. And if you are not resourceful and agile and able to think on your feet and make good decisions quickly without all of the relevant information, you're going to have a really tough time, right? Because things are changing all the time. There's so much fluidity in everything, in every industry, in the economy, in the regulations surrounding it, in speed to market and speed out of market. I mean, how many things have we just seen the last 2 months, valued at $8 billion 2 years ago, just went bankrupt. I mean, things change fast, and you got to be willing to have nothing sacred other than your morals and your driving principles.
Welcome to the Oxygen Podcast. Over the next 20 minutes, dive into the world of business with tips, tricks, and success stories straight from the trenches. Our guests bring real-world advice and tools that serve as their oxygen on their journey. Get ready for a breath of fresh air on this episode of the Oxygen Podcast.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Oxygen Podcast. I am crazy excited to present this episode to you today. As you know, we are on a journey to make sure we are bringing you entrepreneurs who are on a whole different level of productivity. And I am pretty sure that that's exactly the conversation that you are going to hear today. So let me introduce you to Ian Pruckner. Welcome to the Oxygen Podcast.
Thanks, Kat. I'm excited. It's going to be a lot of fun.
All right, awesome. So tell my listeners, before I totally jump into my questions today, a little bit about you and what you are doing in the business world. Give us your version of your intro.
Sure. So I am a serial entrepreneur. I've been in business for almost 20 years. I was a pastor prior to being in business. So I was always into helping people and building teams and doing all those sorts of fun things. In 2006, we took some pay cuts at the church. And so I started my own business on the side, and it just sort of took off. It went crazy. We ended up selling that business a couple of years ago for multi 8 figures. I was the sole owner. So it was a great exit, fantastic experience, made a lot of great lifelong friends and impacted a lot of people. And got into the training, consulting, speaking space really as a byproduct of that. Everybody would call my office all the time. How are you doing this? What are you doing there? Can you give us this tool? Can you give us this thing? And it was really almost overwhelming, right? It was a burden to our staff. And so I just started recording our best practices, documenting our SOPs, the things we did that worked. And lo and behold, there's a lot of people who were looking for that. They were willing to pay for speed, right? They didn't want to learn it all themselves. They wanted to go to somebody who'd done it. So I'd gotten into that. I wrote a book that ended up doing pretty well. It's called ByProduct. And that was sort of my MO. A few years back, I was approached by a couple of friends that had started a business in the digital product, e-commerce, fintech space. Really innovative, pretty new concept. And they brought me on board at first to consult for them. And they ended up making me a full-blown equity partner. And I ended up actually becoming the CEO of that business over the last couple of years. So now I operate in that function. It's actually a conglomerate of a number of companies in the lead gen, marketing, advertising, and e-commerce space. So it's been a lot of fun. The company has done really, really well for a very short amount of time that's been in existence. And so we're just focused on growing that business, stabilizing for the growth that we've seen, and setting up for another round of growth, and then eventually an exit on that company as well. So that's sort of my deal. And then I dabble in all sorts of stuff. I invest in real estate and all sorts of syndications and private offerings and placements and that sort of thing. So that's what I do for fun. Is I look at deals and I invest money primarily with friends and people that are doing cool things that I want to support.
So I just have to say, based on those comments alone, I always say you are best serving the people that you used to be. You're about to just dole out all the information that we need right here. So
nice.
This is going to be the best 25 minutes that you've spent. So I'm super excited. All right. So let's start with what I think is a journey that some of us really struggle with, but probably one of the most important ones. I got on your profile once we got acquainted remotely, and I love the fact that you describe yourself first and foremost as a father, and a husband before you say, I am a CEO, a business owner. And this was a really important part of my journey. For people that are in this community, they know that at one point my titles were really important to me. I had gone through crazy stuff in life, but now if you ask me who I am, I say I'm a mom first. So tell me a little bit about what that looks like and why you choose to say I am a husband and a father first before you are all of these accolades that you have.
Yeah. So first thing I'll tell you is easier said than done. We can all say things and living it is completely different, right? But I'll tell you two things. Number one is who we are is infinitely more important than what we do. And so what I do professionally is a byproduct of who I am, but it is not who I am. And like you, Kat, I sort of learned that it could have been harder. I learned it a hard way. Thank goodness it wasn't as hard as it could be. But, 6-7 years ago, I was at the top of my game. I was making a recurring 7-figure personal income without having to put a lot of effort in. And like my life was really amazing compared to most people's standards of life. And I went through a health scare that was probably one of the worst 4 months of my life. And that health scare radically changed what I valued and the priority order in which I valued things. I always valued my family. I always valued my relationship. I always valued my businesses. But it really forced me to relook and say, what am I building and who am I building this for? And, we don't want our why to die on the altar of our dream, right? Like the reason why we're doing that, for me, it was for my kids. It was for my family. It was to give them an example and to change our family tree, but also to give them one of my favorite things that I love to tell the people I lead. It's not what you leave to people. It's what you leave in them that's most important. And so I just had a fundamental shift in like, why am I doing this? Right? Because all the accolades, the big houses, the nice cars, the fancy trips, the influence, all of that, I've had it, still have it, but it doesn't define me, because when you get defined by those things, you become a slave to the people who issue them, right? And that was just a fundamental decision I made after really having to make like some life choices based on the health issue that I was dealing with. It's like, you know what, these are the most important things to me, period. And so that's where I'm going to lead. And if they aren't first, then there's not room for a second place there. And so that changed what I do with where I spend my time, who I spend my time with, what projects we work on. I mean, we get pitched stuff on the daily, and 95% of it plus just dies immediately because it would interfere in some way with my time, my travel, my ability to coach my kids' sports teams and do the things that are really most important in life. You can build business whenever you want. You only get one shot with your kids, and life's too short to mess up that shot.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think you make a decision about what you are attached to, and you're attached to those kiddos, right? But then when we talk about things like selling a business, like you have been through, and I think it uniquely positions you when you've been through acquisitions or mergers, or you've sold a business. We've been through an acquisition here recently. I acquired a business, which everybody says, wow, there's not a lot of coaches out there that can say, hey, they've walked down this path with you or ahead of you, so they can kind of, ahead of the potholes, right? And that's something you can emotionally detach from, but that family, that's a separate thing. So I give you a lot of credit. I think that it uniquely positions you as a coach, and kudos to you for being ahead of the path on that one. So let's talk about the sale of this organization. Obviously not a big, not a small feat for you, especially when you are a solo owner. Again, congratulations to you, because there's a lot of people who will never experience that in life. Tell me a little bit about what you learned. I mean, you mentioned to me you've never been to business school. That is not, that's not a certificate hanging on your wall. By the way, it doesn't qualify you either. So tell me what you learned in that experience, and what you'd tell somebody that is thinking that's something that they want to be able to do.
Yeah, that's a great question. We could be here for 2 episodes talking about all. So, I mean, high level, like, what do you want out of your life? Like, you got to figure that out, because a sale is not the right thing for everybody. And many times a sale is not the right thing at all, depending on how it's structured and what you're going to do with your life afterwards, right? Like a lot of my friends that have sold stuff, the year, 2, 3 years following that is a dark time for them because they were defined, knowing it or not, by what they did. And now all of a sudden, the thing they built, the dream that they lived and brought into fruition is now gone. It's almost a grieving period, not because it died in a bad way, but because it's gone in a good way. I went through some of that. And so I would tell you first and foremost, if you're thinking about selling a business, why? Why? What are you trying to accomplish, or what are you maybe trying to remove or eliminate? And what will you do afterwards? And how will that make you feel about what you're doing in your life's course? The second thing that I would tell you is make sure you have great teams around you, right? So like my attorneys did a fantastic job, and they really helped us put together a deal that was, it was not something that I think I would have willingly gone into based on some of the circumstances around the sale of that business, but it's something that made it a reasonable transaction and something that probably was best for all parties involved, for the continued growth of the business and for some of the direction that I wanted to go in my life. So having a great team around you that can understand what you're trying to do, what your negotiables and non-negotiables are, and then how to represent you fairly and get you what you need, I think is fantastic. And then you need to have a good financial team in place, right? Because once you sell, the money machine is gone, right? And so you need to make sure that, you're not just looking at this big pile of cash and thinking like, oh, I hit the lottery, right? I'm 40 years old. I sold the business when I'm 39 years old. I had a long time, knock on wood, right? That would have been producing for me. And so I need to make sure that those numbers work and that my plan, works and not like, hopefully it works. Like it's almost idiot proof that it works and gets you what you need. And so I would, make sure that you have all those ducks in a row, because I see a lot of guys, they sell stuff and it's like, what were you thinking? You're going to have to be doing something else here in a year or 2 years. Maybe you would have been better to just keep growing what you were great at versus having to maybe learn something new and start over because you wanted to say you did a deal. And there's a lot of guys out there like that right now that'll get into bad deals because they just want to say that they did one, or you're frustrated with somebody or someone or some rule that's in effect now, and you're running away from that instead of chinning up to it. And so just evaluate why you're doing it. Make sure you got a good exit plan and that plan is a long-term stable plan that doesn't put you in a bad position down the road.
Yeah, I hear a very common thread as you talk that you are a huge proponent of being agile. And I love that here, right? Like we talk about that in just the function of oxygen as a whole. Like, does your business expand and contract like a set of lungs? But you seem to have a pretty consistent message of agility in life, in business. Like tell me a little bit about what that means to you.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we plan and God laughs, right? And so, you
touche.
you learn that the hard way and a few times. And then you realize, agility is not a luxury, it's a necessity, right? Like almost nothing is going to go the way that you think it's going to go in the time frame that you think it's going to go there. And if you are not resourceful and agile and able to think on your feet and make good decisions quickly without all of the relevant information, you're going to have a really tough time, right? Because things are changing all the time. There's so much fluidity in everything, in every industry, in the economy, in the regulations surrounding it, in speed to market and speed out of market. How many things have we just seen the last 2 months, valued at $8 billion 2 years ago, just went bankrupt. Things change fast, and you got to be willing to have nothing sacred other than your morals and your driving principles. Those need to be in stone, and your how and your what need to be written on paper and be willing to be rewritten multiple times. And you look at a company like Apple. Apple is one of my favorite examples of this, right? So Apple is a computer company, but they make 70% of their revenue plus from non-computer things, right? And so, probably the Apple truists back in the day we're very against expanding into smartphones, iPods, digital music devices, etc. That's not their core business. Let's stay on core. And somebody was visionary enough to see that is not going to be a stable business long term, and that we can pioneer something and really own a big space there. So, I love that idea, and I'm a big proponent of fixing things that aren't broken, because one day they will be. Just because it's not broken now is no guarantee that it won't be broken in the future. And in fact, it's pretty much always going to be broken in the future, right, Kat? Like, look at the biggest businesses from 150 years ago. The biggest businesses in the world, they don't exist anymore. Hardly any of them. There's maybe a handful that are that old because things have changed and they didn't adapt. They got so set into what they were doing, they died with their market or with their idea. And so we need to, as entrepreneurs, be smarter than that and understand it's probably not going to look the way I think, and that's okay.
Yeah, Apple is almost one of those companies, since you brought that one up, because I love the study of Apple as well, that even they are outpacing themselves. Depending on what your thought process is, once Steve Jobs was gone, his vision to be able to exceed what was currently being developed, it's almost not moving as fast, right? His ability to think outside of what was currently in production, they're fumbling a little bit. So yeah, even Apple struggles with that. As I hear you talk, what would you say to an entrepreneur? Because I know there are some things that your community currently is doing to support this. So what would you tell an entrepreneur right now would be the best way to support themselves? What do you think? Things are moving fast. It's going to move fast. Like there are like micro generations happening inside entrepreneurism right now. What do you think an entrepreneur should do to best support themselves right now?
That's a good question. So obviously, I mean, you got to double down on your income producing activity. Income buys you time and time buys you options and opportunity. And so that's always got to be at the front of the line, right? Like you meet these guys and they're so product focused or they're so process focused, they forget to make money. And you are in business. You're not a charity, you're in business. And if you love charity, being in business is a great way to support that, right? So you need to be income production focused. But I always tell people you need three things. You need proximity, you need accountability, you need community. You need those three pieces, right? Because ultimately, like you cannot expand your own vision. Somebody else is going to do that for you. We live in what I call CSL, current situation limitation. We look at our resources and we plan based on those. We look at our networks, we look at our previous experiences, and by and large, that tends to dictate within a little bit of a percentage differential what we're going to do in the future, right? And so we got to get around people that are playing at a fundamentally different level because it changes us and it brings awareness to the fact that there are other levels to the game. Before I was in business, one of my first mentors told me, we worked at this church on $1 Million Mile in Detroit, Michigan. And, where I am in Florida now, $1 Million House it's like a little shack, right? It's like, with bars on the windows. But there it was like huge homes and all the new money was right out there by this church, right? So all the Detroit Lions and the Red Wings and living in these big mansions. And one of my mentors told me, he said, what's interesting is there's always another level. He said, see, you think that, man, the people living in these homes, they've arrived and they're probably worth $1 million or $2 million maybe. But those guys look at these guys over here and they think, man, if I could only get there, they're maybe worth 5 or 10 million. And the 5 or 10 million guys look at the $25 million guys and say, when I get to, I will have arrived there. And the $25 million guys look at the $50 million guys and they think, well, it'll be easier when and it just goes, there's always another level. And so if we're the biggest fish in the pond, we're in the wrong pond, right? So proximity is important because you can't learn those things. You catch those things. You watch how people live and how they act and why they are where they are. And so you got to surround yourself by that. So the second is accountability. Like the fact is the greatest greats of all time in any field all have coaches and accountability processes. And most of the time their coaches are accountability. That's all they are. Like think about Tiger Woods in his prime. He's the best golfer in the world, but he is a coach. That's sort of interesting because by default, the coach is not as good as he is at that specific skill, but the coach is better at some of the ancillary skills, the mindset, the mental toughness, the physiology control. And so that's why he's using that person because he knows without that person, it's unlikely that I will discipline myself to that level that I need to continue the growth that I'm painstakingly inching out inch by inch, right? So accountability, winners in business run towards it and everybody else runs away from it, period, right? And Man, Kat, so many people that they would rather be deceived that they're doing well and look like they're doing well than actually be doing well. So,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
that's crazy. And then community, right? Because community, having people that are sort of on your journey with you, like being an entrepreneur is probably one of the most emotionally taxing things you're ever going to do, right? Like a day in the life of the entrepreneur, great news, terrible news, amazing
Yeah.
news. I want to end it all. This wasn't so bad. This is unbelievable. Wait a second, it's gone. Right? It's like, and
Yeah.
that's all in like a 2 hour period, right? And so
Yeah.
just having other people that are on that journey with you to let you know, like, you're not crazy, your goals are worth it, you're on the right path. It takes longer than you thought. You are making progress, even though you don't see it because you look at it every day, but we see it because we only see you once a week or once a month. Just having that community around you that has your goals and interests at heart, right? Because, like, man, when I started in business, like, everybody thought I was crazy. Like, nobody believed in my vision, not even my own family. It's not because they were wrong or bad. Like, they loved me. They were trying to protect me. Right. And so they look and they say, well, I don't know if I could do that. And so they project their limitations onto you because they don't want to see you getting hurt. All that to say, sometimes it's like you against the world. But when you're in community, you're better together, right? Bible says one puts 1,000 to flight, two puts 10,000 to flight. It's a spiritual principle that in community, there's multiplication, right? And so having that community around you, resources, network, introductions, best practices, experience, encouragement. We could sit here for a half an hour and talk about all of the benefits of being in community with people who are like-minded.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's so we had Jillian Michaels on the podcast
Oh,
2 years ago, and she's a like lover, hater and lover at the same time, right? For those of us who are of the generation of that little tiny show she was on. And she even made the point that a professional athlete, they don't have just one coach. They have eight. Like, they have a coach for every little tiny micro thing that they do. And that's what causes that exponential impact, So for those of us who really are on that non-straight journey to greatness, that those coaches are a part of the group that lifts you up, that rising tide that lifts all boats. Like, it isn't just one person. And I think you're exactly right. To the young person who wants to go away to college and be the first person that's ever left home to go away to college, their family isn't telling them no because it's not something that they should do. It's out of love that fear is saying, God, please don't leave my nest, right? But
Sure.
it's, yes, absolutely, they should go to college, but it's a fear of, that's well founded. And I think it's very similar to the entrepreneurial journey, but it's very similarly, even you and I are in a similar space. However, we both should be boosting every entrepreneur out there. Like, that's why podcasts like this exist, and why other people shy away from boosting every amount of love and support out there. And I think it speaks to you and how awesome you are that you're willing to do this kind of thing. I mean, again, I think it's awesome. So
You're too
tell,
kind.
tell me tell me a little bit about your war room. We talked about this off camera, but I'm going to call you out here just a little bit, because I think that it's on your Instagram feed. We're going to give people access to that here in just a little bit. But I want you to tell us a little bit about some of the results that you're seeing and why you think it is. First of all, I want you to tell me why you thought it was the right move to create, and then I want you to tell me a little bit about what you're seeing as a result.
Yeah. So I am not a coach. People call me coach. It makes me a little uncomfortable, honestly. I've learned to endear the term. I'm not a coach. I'm a business person. But in the businesses that I've built, and we've been blessed to have 3 different businesses in the same year make over $1 million in net profit in 3 different industries, and a 4th one that was pretty close. Hopefully this year that 4th one goes over as well. But in the process of becoming that person that could build and run those things, you learn a lot of things that are very valuable to people who are coming up behind you. And so as we were talking, my admins would get 20 calls a day from people in that industry that were like, what are you all doing? I need help. Can you give me this? What's this tool? And so we really set up that coaching and consulting as sort of a byproduct of the main business. It's like, hey, look, we don't have time to do all that. So So even still today, I limit my one-on-ones. I only take 10 people at a time because I just cannot, my time needs to go into the businesses, right? Yeah. And so what I found was my demand on that was so high, and I had to turn so many people away. I'm like, let's do a group. And at least that way you can get the principles and the foundations that I would be teaching you one-on-one, right? And it's sort of a done with you instead of a done for you. And what I found was I was able to get a lot more impact and a lot more influence much more quickly across a group like that versus just the one-on-one guys. And it's amazing. Like I have 5 pillars there: faith, family, fitness, finance, future self, 5 F's. And I'm a big believer that if you're not winning in all of those, you're not winning at all, right? As the Bible says, what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? And that is absolutely true. Conversely, what does it profit a man or a woman to gain the world and lose their family or lose their health? What does it profit a man to have 6-pack abs and be in the best shape of his life and can't keep a solid relationship and doesn't respect himself, right? Like, these things are not compartmentalized. They bleed into each other, and they are the most important facets of our life. When we get to the end of our life, these are the things that mattered to us. And so being able to build a group that is based around honoring those 5 principles, and every single day, daily doing the little things that get the big results that everybody wants, that's what that group was built on. So we've seen people lose 100 pounds in the last year in that group. We've seen people increase their income by 400, that one guy, 400 something thousand bucks, bunches of people, $100,000, $200,000. We've seen people get into marriage counseling and at least to this point, sustain something that was not going well. We've seen people have major breakthroughs with issues they've been carrying around for a long time. I mean, it's really a passion project of mine now to see some of the stuff that's going on. One of our War Room clients, she just rented a house in Anna Maria Island for the entire winter. It's her first time doing it, right? And she's like, hey, this is a goal for me. I want to get here. So we worked on that, and here she is, right? So, that's the part that's really exciting for me, is watching people improve their lives, not just monetarily. Money is important. It's a main thing, but sure, really winning in every area.
I think that there's a couple things here. So first of all, there's a lot of successful people similar to you who say, hey, by the way, I have this thing and I tripped on a byproduct because I was looking for impact, right? And, we talked about Apple a little while ago. If you actually watch Steve Jobs' model, it goes from the outside to the inside. Impact to product. Product is the little side, is the little circle, right? Yeah. And again, here you are. Impact is fixing this. It's the emotional intelligence that people are on a journey of. And that's what you did. And the product on the inside becomes this small component, and it's the impact. Again, it's this resounding message that if you hear anything from this interview, it is be on the journey of emotional intelligence and the impact that you have on others. If you could scream it from the mountaintops, that would be it. We're pretty passionate about it around here. And I think it's amazing that other people are saying it. I can't say it enough. So I have a couple of just quick questions for you here, because we're winding down on our time. So I was surfing through your Instagram account before we got on here today, in addition to your very cool dog and your beautiful wife. But tell me, there's a post on here that says, name a book that changed your life. And I was a little surprised that all of the comments on there kind of follow a very specific theme and very different than the comments on my clients who answer that. So tell us a book that changed your life. Tell my audience, because my audience answered that question much differently than yours.
Oh my gosh. I have a bunch of books that have changed my life. People ask me, what should I read? And I say, well, what are you trying to learn? Right? That would be a good place to start, right? So, man, so many. If I could be just brutally honest, I don't know the listenership of your audience very well, but there were really 3 books that I think have impacted me more than anything else. One was called Launching a Leadership Revolution. It's by 2 guys named Chris Brady and Orrin Woodward. And it was like the Bible of small business entrepreneurship for me, right? Like, I read that book 30 times, and it definitely laid the foundation of like, how do you build teams of people who are giving their life to a why that is bigger than them? How do you find them? How do you lead them? How do you create that culture? How do you deal with the challenges with them when you have them? That was really foundational, number one. Number two was a book by a guy named Joel Osteen. He's a pretty popular TV evangelist. People have mixed feelings on him. I've had the opportunity to meet him a number of times. I have some friends that are very close friends with him. For whatever it's worth, he's about as genuine of a guy that you'll ever meet. And he wrote a book called Breakout, and it released during the recession, the Great Recession. And there's something about that book. I have read that book 30 plus times. I have multiple copies of it all over the house. They're all highlighted with multiple highlighters. I love to go through and highlight. I denote the date and the color so I can go back through and look like, hey, in 2010, these are the things that apparently stuck out to me. But in 2013, these were the things that just kind of showed me my progression of that. But
what a great tip. I love that. That's a fantastic tip.
It's really interesting to watch your evolution, because some things are important to you today because of where you are. But when you're beyond that, they no longer serve a purpose in your life, and vice versa.
Sure.
So there's something about that book that just spoke unreasonable belief into me that I could do something so much bigger and so much more impactful with my life than I had ever even dreamed. And that not only could I do that, but that was actually God's desire for me, that he himself put those dreams in my heart, and that his gift to me was the dream, and my gift to him was living the dream and building the dream. He gave me the gift, and my gift back to him was, here's what I did with what you gave me. The third book was a book called Destined to Reign by a guy named Joseph Prince. Joseph Prince is a pastor in Singapore. And I sort of grew up in this, I worked at the church, and I sort of grew up with this idea. It was actually relatively profitable idea, actually, because it's really built in a lot of human wisdom. And that's, the more you put in, the more you get out, right? But the way that was like, hey, if you want to be more blessed, you got to spend more time in prayer. You got to give more to the ministry, or you need to do this or that. And I was building my business. I was working as much as I possibly could. And I'm like, maybe I'm just going to be stuck here because I don't have more time to do this, and I can't do more of these things. And that book was really foundational in teaching me a truth just about our relationship with our Creator, that like, hey, if you've accepted that there's nothing you can do in life to earn you any more right standing with God than you have right now in this moment. It's not up to you. No amount of work you do. And that's very anti-human knowledge, right? Like the more we do, or we get. It's already been done, and you should walk in that truth. And to me, I read that book 2 or 3 times. My wife and I read it together over a couple month period of time. And that was the first real quantum leap in income. I was making about $300,000 a year at the time, which wasn't bad, especially in 2010, 2011 in a recession. But we took our income from 300 grand to $1.1 million in about 14 months after reading that book. And I changed nothing about what I was doing. Who was doing the work had changed. Mostly what I expected to get out of that work, right? Like I expected people to do business with me. I expected people who were involved with me to grow and to hit their goals. And it moved from like, hey, here's what I've seen before, which is most people aren't going to do much of anything with most of this, right? To having a different expectation that when I saw you and I talked to you, I just looked at you different. I treated you different. I held you to a different standard because of what I expected from myself. And so those 3 books were really pivotal for me.
So I'm glad I waited to ask you this question. So the other thing that I wrote down in preparation for our call today was that I noticed that you refer to yourself as I currently am this. And that's very different. Maybe you don't even know that you do this, but most people do not refer to themselves like there is a future that I don't know, and I'm willing to accept it when it comes. And I interview a lot of people for different things, whether it be a potential job for a client or, human inventory is something that we do. I'm exposed to a lot of people, whether I like it or not. And people of very high caliber. And that is a mindset. And I think it's what you're referring to just now, that there is more for you, whether you know it yet or not. And it comes through no matter what. So for those of you who are listening, your mindset is no joke. And that is completely derived by the people you surround yourself with, the rooms that you are in, the content that you read, the clients that you do business with. It is, and again, this is an emotionally intelligent conversation and a pursuit of emotional intelligence, but it oozes out of you.
You're too kind. You're
Do
too
you
kind.
know that about yourself?
No, and yes. So I look at myself a lot like a turtle on a fence post. I didn't get there by myself. I've been surrounded by great people. I've had great mentors. And who I am and whose I am is something that's foundational to me, right? But it's so interesting because I can look back and all of the most amazing things in my life, they found me. I didn't find them, right? I had just gotten out of a 4-year relationship with somebody that I thought I was going to marry, and it blew up, and it was one of the most devastating times of my life. And, I ended up sort of fostering a relationship with God through that experience. And 6 months later, my wife walks into my life randomly through this little storefront church that I ended up getting involved in. I was a musician, and so I became their music director for free because there's 40 people there. I was better than the other guy that was there. And all of a sudden she's there, my first business, the one we sold. I didn't know anything about it, had no interest in it. I took a pay cut out the church. I was looking to do something on the side. And my buddy says, hey, you should go look into this. You could do it on the side. You'd probably be good. Literally just dumb lucked into it. Right. The business that I manage now in the chief executive role is same thing. I wasn't looking for it. It came looking for me. And that's a big model that I've tried to, without getting too spiritual here, it's an interesting thing, right? Because like, if you look at the Jewish foundation of faith and the Christian foundation of faith, the Jews were looking for this Messiah, and the Messiah was supposed to run the government and do, be this sort of leader. It looked like this certain way, and instead they get a baby in a manger. That's what they get. And so it doesn't look like they think it should look, but it's actually 100 times better than they expected. They were looking for essentially like a temporary ruler. Instead, they get 100 times better than that, but it didn't look that way. And so that foundational belief has always kept me open to the fact that things may not look how I think they look. And I got to be smart enough to, 1, recognize it when I find it, and 2, act on it. Right. And so many people lose their opportunities because they don't look how they think they should. They're expecting it to be this way, and they're only expecting it because that's what they want and that's what they think. But like, newsflash, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, even if I'm the only one in the dadgum room. Right. So I'm not going to put too much trust in my own thinking and how I think things are going to be. I'm going to be open. Doesn't mean I'm going to be stupid. Doesn't mean I'm not going to do due diligence. Doesn't mean I'm going to jump at everything thrown to me, but I'm going to be open to the fact that it may not look how I anticipated it to look. That keeps me really open and really teachable for the most part. Right. And that has served me really well over the years.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to believe that you and I were intended to meet for a reason, because I think this conversation was freaking awesome. All right. Can you tell this audience a little bit about how they can follow you or interact with you before I ask you our last question?
Sure, absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram at Entrepreneur. Go to the blue check one, not the 8 other people that have fake accounts. I will never message you about Bitcoin. In fact, I will never message you ever unless you message me first. Okay. So just buyer beware, watch out there. No Nigerian prince winnings that I need you to wire me money for. Okay. So Instagram, make sure it's a blue check. That's the best way to find me, and you can connect. There's, links there in the bio that you can connect on other things. Check out my book. It's called ByProduct. You can get it anywhere books are sold. And definitely a cool thing in terms of learning how to program permanent change easily and systematically. So those are 2 places we can go and connect further.
I love that so much. I can't tell you how much I really enjoyed this. All right, so I asked all of our entrepreneurial guests on here, what do you need next? And here's why we ask. As entrepreneurs, a lot of times it's hard for us to identify exactly how the next thing is and to name it. So, do you know and are you willing to tell us what you need next?
Sure. So we always need a lot of things, right? So
Right.
yeah, so what I would say is great people, specifically great people in the tech and lead gen space with management capabilities and leadership vision, right? So we're looking to make a couple of C-level hires over the next year as we continue to scale out one of those businesses. So that's top priority for us, getting the right people in the right seats there. Unique company. We have innovated a product that doesn't exist outside of us, and so there's no rule book. There's no ringer somewhere else that knows all about how to run this that we can just go and hire. Like these are people that have got to have this mix of current management and leadership experience, industry knowledge, and the teachability to apply that knowledge in a way they have never tried to apply it before to build something really cool. So that would be an ask, is if somebody knows somebody that's in tech leadership that's looking to make a transition, we'd be interested in talking with them. We're not looking for people that do not currently occupy a C-level position in a company doing less than 10 million in annual revenue. So we appreciate any connections there, but if they don't meet that, please just go ahead and hang on to that. We're not looking for people to learn on the job here. We're looking for people that are experts at that. The other thing I would tell you is I'm always looking to connect with amazing people that have great stories and are impact and influence driven for our podcast and our content, but also as speakers for our war room coaching group, some of the masterminds and things that we do. Those are always really, really useful. I've built my little empire of sorts, just making friends with great people over 20 years. And sooner or later, one of them calls you or you call them, and there's a little bit of magic and you build something really cool. And so any connections like that are fantastic.
Oh, I love that. All right. Well, you heard it here. So we will make sure that all of that goes in the show notes. Ian, thanks for spending some time with us. And we remind everybody to take just a little bit of time to breathe life in. We'll see you guys all next time.